Hello, welcome to the first video I've done in a few weeks now because more or less I've been quite bored with the NBA. There hasn't been a lot going on. Everyone's sort of waiting for this Kevin Durant trade to happen. I've been waiting for that Kevin Durant trade to happen, and because of that, decided to try something new. Decided to do a bit of a positions ranking video. Hopefully turn it into a series if you guys like it. If I enjoy making this video, I'll do the other positions, maybe do things like a sixth man or a coach as well. But yeah, we're starting today with the point guards, talking about ranking the top 10 point guards in the NBA. The criteria I decided on, I thought about this for a long time, and this is what I came up with, was it'll be ranking them for the 2022-2023 season, not ranking what they did last year. This is a predictive video about next season, and it'll be based on how much they help their current team win a title. So it's not based on putting them on a random team, it's based on how good they are for their current team, how much they help them win in the regular season, and how much they help them win in a playoff series. So players that really complement their co-stars, they will be ranked better. Players who can't be played off the floor in a playoff series, they will be ranked higher. Because of that, a couple other things to be taken into account. Known injuries will be taken into account only. So for instance, players who are coming off an injury and they'll have load management or a recovery time like a Kawhi Leonard or a Jamal Murray, that is taken into consideration. However, players who have a history of injury, someone like a Kevin Durant, I'm not going to be predicting that, I'm taking him lower because he might have an injury next season. If they're healthy going into the season, I'm predicting they're fully healthy for the season. But if I do know of a load management or something, I'm going to take that into consideration. Kyrie Irving and Ben Simmons are both being considered available in terms of the personal leave side of things. Everything that happened last season, I'm not taking any of that into account. I'm not going to try and predict what's happening with that next season. And it will be based on how much value they add to winning at the position they played most last season. So the positions are based on what position they played the most minutes at last season, according to Basketball Reference. From what I could find, it was difficult to find position minutes. I looked everywhere. It was the best I could find was with Basketball Reference. So I'm going with that. So players like Marcus Smart are considered a point guard. Anthony Davis will be considered, I think, a center. I'll have to check that one. But yeah, also Kyrie Irving, Kevin Durant, both Brooklyn Nets at this point. So that's the team that we're talking about for them. Donovan Mitchell is being talked about as a Utah Jazz as well at this point. So with all that said, let's get into the rankings. So yeah, today we're starting with the point guard position, and it was way harder than I expected. It was really, really tight. There were so many players that I was like, sure, we're going to be an absolute lock to be in there, like top 5, 6. That was what I was expecting. Didn't end up making the list. Some of them end up being like 16, 17. That's how stacked this position is. I'll get into those names later. I'm not going to spoil anything. I'll do the honorable mentions later on in the video. But for now, we're going to start with number 10, and that is Fred VanVleet of the Toronto Raptors. He had a great season last year. I believe he got his first All-Star appearance last year. From what I remember, he was amazing. Last year, 20 points per game, 37% from three, 6.5 assists per night. He's an underrated defender. That played into it a lot, particularly as a smaller guard at only 6'1", a guy that's not going to get played off the court defensively as a smaller guard. That did help him a lot. As I said, he's an underrated passer. He's a great shooter. He's really the engine of that Toronto offense. Pascal Siakam, Scotty Barnes, they might be better players. Possibly, that's debatable. We'll see where they end up in the forward rankings. But yeah, I think Fred VanVleet, a lot of their offense, it runs through Steph Curry, almost in like a I might have said Steph Curry, Fred VanVleet, because it reminds me of Steph Curry, the way he plays. And not in the terms that he's as good as Steph Curry. I'm not saying that for any second. What I'm saying is that the way they use him, running off screens, use his gravity in those things, it does remind me of that. His ability to shoot off the dribble, off the catch, it's pretty good. True shooting percentage wasn't great last season, only 55%, but I think that will improve. He's a small guard that takes a lot of threes, takes a lot of jump shots. It's always going to be low. And I think he's a really good player. It was really tight between him and some of the guys that are like 11 and 12, but I end up giving the nod to Fred VanVleet. Now, number 9, this was really tough. 7, 8, 9, you could have put in any order, and I'd be totally okay with it. These three guys are so close to each other in play style and skill level. But in the end, number 9, I end up going with Kyrie Irving. And it feels so wrong putting him at number 9. It feels so low for Kyrie. But there's just so much talent at the point guard position at the moment in the NBA. And last season, he was amazing when he played. Not getting into all that about whether or not he should have played. But when he did play, he was phenomenal. 27 points per game. Elite efficiency. 41% from 3 on 8 attempts a night. 47% from the field overall. His true shooting percentage, getting it here, 59%. He's a super elite scorer. I think he's an amazing scorer. My only thought was, as I said, I'm ranking them based on how good they are at their position. And even though it is a positionless league, the fact that he is a slightly lesser playmaker than everyone else on this list. He's probably the worst playmaker in this top 10 list. That is probably what dropped him down a little bit for me. Just the fact that these other guys, while he is a decent playmaker and he can pass out of the pick and roll, he can make those like high level reads. He's not the same lob threat that you have in other guys. He's not the same. He doesn't have the same pass to the corner, the pocket pass. He doesn't have that fling over to the corner. Those things just dropped him down that tiny bit. And as I said, it was splitting hairs between him and the guys who are at 8 and 7. But in the end, Kyrie at 9, and to get on the top 10 in this position is a credit to him. Probably if he played a bit more last season, maybe he jumps up a bit. There is that bit of uncertainty. He does have a bit of injury history, but as I said, I wasn't taking that into consideration today. It was all about what he is on the field, and I think in the end, his offense is as elite as his scoring is as elite. Well, that's a tongue twister. Is as elite as everyone else on this list. Just his defense and playmaking was that slight level below some of them, and because of that, he stayed at number 9 for me. Coming in at number 8 is someone I wouldn't have thought would be on this list at the start of 2021, but he surprised me. He had a great season last year, a breakout season, and that is Darius Garland of the Cleveland Cavaliers. First All-Star appearance for him in just his 3rd season, and he was phenomenal. He was amazing last year. 21.5 points per game, 46% from the field, 38% from 3 on almost 7 attempts per night. And the 3-point shot is really there. It is real. Amazing, not just off the dribble threes, but he's catch and shoot threes off relocations. His movement, he was really good. Once again, reminding me a bit of Steph Curry in the way he moves around the court. And what probably jumped him above Kyrie Irving for me, and it was so tough picking between him and Kyrie for 8 and 9, was the playmaking. 8.5 assists for him last night, but not just the assists, it's the reads he's making, the lobs he was throwing. Obviously, having someone like Evan Mobley or Jared Allen does help you in the lob department, but he's a brilliant playmaker, makes some really high-level reads, and is really good at knowing when not to go for them as well. He knows the limitations that his height brings. He is only, I think, 6'2", maybe 6'1" even. So he's a smaller point guard again, but he's so good at knowing when to make that pass, when not to make that pass. His pocket pass is amazing at that. When he gets into that mid-range, he's so shifty, and then as soon as the defense collapses, it's a lob. If they don't, he's a really crafty finisher. He can kick it out to the corner. They just don't have 3-point shooters that can hit those shots at this point. Hopefully that improves though with Karis LeVert, Colin Sexton coming back, maybe even Ochai Agbaji, guys like that. But yeah, I think Darius Garland is one of the most underrated players in the NBA. He's a phenomenal point guard. He was the engine of their offense. Like, Evan Mobley was amazing, don't get me wrong. Jared Allen was amazing, but everything ran through Darius Garland. And he basically, when they were fit, when they had Allen, when they had Rubio, they were a playoff team. They were going to be a playoff team. They were going to be the 6th seed. They were going to be the 5th seed in the Eastern Conference. So he was amazing last season. I am really excited to see him in the next. I think he's going to continue to grow. I think he's going to continue with his passing. I think as he gets better shooters around him, he's going to be better because he does have those great. He can hit the corner pass in the pick and roll. So he's going to continue to get better next season. Darius Garland's at number 8. Coming in at number 7 is another small point guard, another young point guard, and that is Trae Young. 1 year older than Darius Garland, but Trae Young is a phenomenal offensive talent. We all know that. We saw what he did in the playoffs last year, leading that Atlanta team through the Eastern Conference Finals. It was a bit of an easy run. They went through injuries. I went through Ben Simmons and everything that was happening there. But still, nothing to take away from the fact that he was amazing last season. He had a really good year. And yeah, 28 points per game, 38% from 3. That was a big one for me. The fact that the 3-point shot finally started to drop consistently. My one criticism of Trae Young was that he was always way too reliant on his 3-point shot off the dribble. That wasn't there. It wasn't as big of a threat as he thought it was. When he hit it, it looked good, but we saw the highlights, but the percentages just didn't back it up. And the fact that teams would just continue to go under the screen because you could afford to let him shoot more than you could afford to let him get into the lane. But it's starting to drop, and now you can't afford that, and that makes him way more dangerous, considering only, what is it? Having a look here in Basketball Reference, I believe 22% of his 3-pointers last year were assisted, so everything else is off the dribble. That goes to show how much he is shooting off the dribble. So the fact that that shot is dropping now, that's a really good sign for him. Slightly above Garland, slightly above Kyrie, just because I think the playmaking is a tiny bit better and the scoring is a tiny bit better than Darius Garland. He has the playmaking over Kyrie and the scoring over Darius Garland. He sort of had what made both of them amazing. He has it both. He's a really good player. One of the best lob passers in the league. Top 5 passer probably in the NBA. Thinking about it now, he's so good. He's so crafty at disguising that lob pass into his floater, and it's just the way he destroys drop coverage in the pick and roll is a sight to behold. He's so good, but then you also can't switch him to him because he's so crafty, so shifty. You can't switch a big onto him unless it's like a Bam Adebayo, and like one team in the NBA has a Bam Adebayo, and that was why he was absolutely exposed in the playoffs last season. He had a terrible playoff run. It was only 4 games against Miami, 5 games against Miami. Sorry, they did pick a game off them, but he was horrific in those games. Averaged more turnovers than assists per game. His turnovers do go up in the playoffs, which is a bit of a concern for a smaller guard. I think he is a bit too ball-centric at the moment. I'd like him to start taking more threes off passes. Hopefully that comes with DeJounte Murray running the show some of the time. He can start doing some of that stuff that Darius Garland does, and Steph and Fred VanVleet and those guys going a bit more off-ball. I think that would really add a dimension to his game. Will he be willing to do that? Don't know, but Ice Trae is a great player, and he comes in at number 7 on this list. Number 6 is Jrue Holiday of the Milwaukee Bucks. Age 32 season. Jrue Holiday is an amazing player. He is one of the best perimeter defenders in the NBA. Some would say the best perimeter defender in the NBA one-on-one. And I could understand where you're coming from. I would just go Caruso or Marcus Smart over him, but Holiday would be up there. I might even take Holiday. I don't know. Those 3 would be the top 3 for me. He is so good one-on-one. He can switch. He's so versatile. He's an amazing 3-point shooter in the regular season. That 3-point shot does drop off in the playoffs. It is a bit of concern. But the thing for me was, as I said at the start, what was the criteria of this? How does he help his team winning? Well, we saw Jrue Holiday took a Milwaukee Bucks team that was on the edge of being a contender and took them to being champions. So that's what bumped him up, because you look at the stats: 18 points per game, 50, 40, 76. So he was really efficient last year, but only 4.5 attempts from 3 per game, but still pretty efficient. You're like, oh, he's pretty good. What is it? 7 assists per game. So his stats are really good. But what jumps him up into that next tier above the Youngs and Garlands is what we have seen, how we saw he did help his team win. Because Holiday was one of the reasons they won that title, was they needed a guy at the point guard position who could be that point of attack defender the way Eric Bledsoe was, be a disruptor, allow them to still play drop coverage, which they could because he can fight over the screens the same way Bledsoe does, but they needed someone that was at least a slight positive on offense, and he was more than a slight positive. Bledsoe was a negative. They needed a positive on offense at the point guard position. They got that in Holiday. They got a better playmaker, got a better shooter, got a better scorer. Holiday is amazing. His defense is elite. His hands are elite. He can follow you all the way up the court defensively and just be an absolute menace. He's great at fighting over screens, which I think is one of the most underrated skills in the NBA. He's phenomenal at it. One of the best, second only to Caruso, in my opinion. And yeah, Jrue Holiday is an amazing point guard, and he comes in at number 6 on this list. So yeah, some honorable mentions before we go on is James Harden, who just slipped out. He was number 11 for me in the end. I cannot believe I didn't have Harden in the top 10, but that's not even because I feel like I'm really overreacting to last year's playoff run. I'm still thinking he's good, but it's just 10 point guards that are better than him at this point. There's so many good point guards. That's not because I think Harden's bad. It's just because of how stacked the point guard position is. Other guys, the Ball brothers, Lonzo, LaMelo, they were so close to making the cut for me. I think Lonzo is possibly the most underrated player in the NBA. I might have already said that about Darius Garland, but Lonzo might be as well, because he is so good. His defense, his playmaking is so underrated. Plus, he's one of the best shooters in the NBA now. He is the best player that you could fit onto if it was who would fit onto literally any team, Lonzo Ball would be on the top 10, I think. LaMelo Ball, so close. Just still a bit inconsistent of a scorer and shooter for me. It was so close. I just want to see what he can do in a playoff setting before I put him above a guy like Fred VanVleet or Kyrie. CJ McCollum, De'Aaron Fox, Marcus Smart, Tyrese Halliburton, Cade Cunningham, Jalen Brunson, Jamal Murray, Josh Giddey, D'Angelo Russell, Malcolm Brogdon. Those are the names that were dropping. Some of those guys had to be in the 20s, not because they're that bad, but because there's just so many good point guards. I can't say how difficult it was making this list. The point guard position is so stacked. It was just near impossible. I cannot explain it. But yeah, those are some of the honorable mentions I just want to get out of the way before we keep going with this video. At number 5 is the 37-year-old Chris Paul. Still on this list. Yes, I saw what happened in the playoffs. I saw what happened in that series against Dallas. I saw what happened in Game 7. But you can't deny the fact that Chris Paul helps his team win. You can't deny the fact that the Phoenix Suns are where they are today because they have Chris Paul as their general. You can't deny the fact that Chris Paul helps them win in the playoffs. They got to the finals. They weren't getting to the finals without Chris Paul. Booker was good. Aiden was good. Mikal Bridges is good. Chris Paul is the general. He is the guy that leads that team. If they lose Devin Booker, it's like, oh man, that's really hurts. But I think Chris Paul is still the most valuable player, or the player that will impact their winning the most. And because of that, he had to be top 5 for me. He did drop off. I think we'll see him continue to drop off next season. Still led the NBA in assists as well last year. 10.5, almost 11 per game. Still almost two steals per game. He isn't as good of a defender as people think he is anymore. He is a lot lazier. He does just pick off some steals, but he's still okay. His hands are quick. He's good at like digging in. Good at all that stuff. He's a very smart defender still, even if he doesn't have the foot speed anymore to keep up with any of those quicker guys. 3-point shot was lacking last year, 31%. But I think that was more of a down year. I think coming off the big playoff run, they were struggling. Having the full off season this year, or almost a full off season, they did play have the 2 rounds in the playoffs. I still think Chris Paul affects winning more than all the guys below him for his current team. Phoenix are not who they are without Chris Paul. Obviously, he did have that bad playoff run. He had that really... Oh, didn't have a bad playoff run. He was decent in the playoffs. He just had that really bad game or few games against Dallas. He was still amazing against New Orleans. When Devin Booker is out, he took them over New Orleans while fighting an absolute pest in Jose Alvarado. He was still really good. And while he's probably going to have another dip in the regular season, Phoenix are making the playoffs. Don't overreact to what you saw. They'll still be a top 3 or 4 seed in the Western Conference next season. Possibly the number 1 seed still. Who knows? They've got Aiden back. I think they're back on track a little bit. And come playoff time, Chris Paul is still one of the best point guards in the NBA. Coming in at number 4 is a guy who I didn't really know how to rank because we barely saw him last year. And what we did see was absolutely horrific. But that is Dame Lillard. Last year, he was really bad in the 29 games he played. 32% from 3, 40% from the field. Turnover heavy. He just wasn't good. But Portland weren't good. And he was injured. He was injured from whatever happened in the Olympics. I think it was a back injury, if I remember correctly. I think it was a back injury he had. So I'm really not paying attention to that. And yes, I know that is an injury I know about. I think he's fixed that. I think he could have come back last season if he wanted to. They just were taking every precaution, and the fact that they were tanking by the end of the season, they didn't care about getting him back. They were fine to tank out the rest of the season. They're building around him. They trust that he's okay next season. I trust that he's okay next season. And a fully healthy Dame Lillard is still possibly one of the best players in the NBA and still affects winning for his team more than almost anyone else, except for the 3 guys above him on this list. And he is still so good. He is one of the best scorers, and he's not a heliocentric scorer as much as a Luka or a Steph or a Trey, where it's just like, I'm just going to take the ball and I'm just going to dribble for 20 seconds and then I'm going to run a pick and roll every single possession. I don't throw Steph in there. He's very different, sorry. But in terms of like those Lukas, the Treys, those guys, Dame Lillard is not like that, I don't think. But he's still one of the best scorers somehow. It just feels different. Maybe he does have the same similar usage rates, but it feels more like it's in the flow of the offense. And usually it's just because he just grabs it from 40 feet out and shoots it and hits a 3. And it's ridiculous. His range is ridiculous. It is rivaled only by Steph in not only just the range he can shoot and where he consistently shoots, but the percentage he shoots from deep. Like Luka can take those deep step backs, but it's still a win for the defense. Trey can take those deep off the dribble 3s, but it's a win for the defense. When Dame does, like only Steph, it really isn't a win for the defense because he just hits it so consistently. He wasn't last year, but as I said, that's not the Dame I'm judging. I'm judging the Dame from 2020, 2021, that sort of time, because that is the last time we truly saw him healthy. I think for Portland next year, they're a good team. It's the best team I remember having around Dame in terms of defenders and versatility and length, but they only succeed if Dame is good, and I think he will be good. I think he'll be back to his best. I think he'll be back to like MVP level Dame. And I think I could totally see him leading Portland to like a top 5 seed or a top 4 seed and just going absurd in the regular season and getting them through to like the Western Conference Finals. Like that is totally a possibility. And that's better than anyone who's below him on this list. That's why I had Dame Lillard at 4. This next one was difficult for me because I don't like to overreact to one season. I like to see consistency from players. But what I saw last year was just so impressive. I could not convince myself not to put this player as high as I did, and that is Ja Morant for Memphis. He was so good. Age 22 season, only played 57 games. It was the injuries, but 27.5 points per game, 6.7 assists. But that does not do it justice either. I just want to put out there, he is a way better playmaker than 6.7 assists would put out there. Some of his reads, when he drives in and gets into the teeth of the defense, the reason he doesn't have more assists is just because he can finish at such a high rate that even when the defense does step up and does meet him at the rim, it's still a higher percentage shot for him to take a crazy layup than it is for him to kick it out to a corner three or for him to dump it off to the dunker's spot. Even if he has like 2 guys on him, it's still a higher percentage shot for him to take that layup. That's why he doesn't have more assists, because he's a smart player and realizes, oh, I can finish through literally any contact. I think I'm the best finishing point guard in the NBA. It's still a better percentage shot for me to take this. But he's a really good playmaker. And when like 2 or 3 guys do collapse, he does have these crazy little drop-off passes. He can hit the corner shooter. He can hit the roll man. He has the pocket pass. He has the lob. He has it all in his bag. But it's just his scoring is at a next level. And he can score. And the thing about him that I love is he's not jump shot dependent. Only 4.5 threes last season per game. And he's averaging 27.5 points. That is so exciting for him, because jump shooting, as good as you can get, it is still a more streaky skill than finishing. And the fact that he is able to score that highly and that consistently, being a finisher as a 6'2 point guard or 6'3 point guard, shows me that he has the potential that can really translate to the playoffs. He can take that into a playoff setting, into a finals, into a playoff run, a deep playoff run, and it will stay. It's not someone like other players like Trey, who needs his jump shot to be falling. Ja, he's just going to be getting into the teeth of the defense. He's going to be racking up free throws come the playoff time. He's just going to be going at the centers in pick and roll coverage every single time down the court. And because of that, I just think he affects winning more than the guys below him on this list. I think he affects his teams winning in the regular season and in the playoffs. It was a really tight call. I can totally understand if you have it the other way around with guys like Dame or even CP3, but I had to have Ja at number 3 on this list. Number 2 on this list, you probably could guess it by now, it is Luka. What can I say about Luka that isn't already said? Possibly the best playmaker in the NBA in terms of a guard. I think he's the best playmaking guard in the NBA. Where you want to put him next to Nikola Jokic, that's up to you, but he was just absurd last season, and the shape he seems to be in going into next season, I think we're going to see it from the beginning. We're not going to see that slow start to the regular season that we saw last year. And I think last year proved he can win in the playoffs. He has the skill to carry a team in the playoffs. He is just absurd. He eats up every single pick and roll coverage. He can absolutely obliterate you in drop because he just gets into the teeth, and he's got a crazy mid-range shot. It's still probably the weakest shot for him is that you do just give him that mid-range floater. But if you don't, he's one of the best lob throwers in the NBA, and he's adding JaVale McGee and Christian Wood to be throwing those lobs to. That is going to be so good. He has the most absurd kick-out passes to the corner shooters I've ever seen, I think ever, in the pick and roll coverage. He's just elite. And then if you switch, he's just going to make your big man dance all day long, and he is going to get into the teeth, or he's going to get a step back 3, or he's going to force a double team. And when he forces a double team, he is one of the best passers out of those. Because of his height, because of his size, he can just stand there, see over the defense, and just pick you apart if you try and double team him. Dallas is a very smartly coached team, and I think because of that, Luka works really well with it, because he is a really smart playmaker, really smart player. Playing with someone like Jason Kidd, who's going to tell everyone where to be cutting, where to be standing, where to be rolling to. He's just working better with that Dallas system every single day. He's a really good player. I don't know how much more I can say about Luka that hasn't already been said. The jump shot is starting to come along, like with Trae Young, better. Once again, it's no longer a weakness when he just settles for a step back 3. He needs to probably get a little bit better in close games at the end, not just like dribbling it out and just going for a step back 3 with 2 seconds left. He probably needs, I'd like to see him attack the center and attack the paint a little bit more at the end of games than he does at the moment, but that's one minor thing, and I think that will come with time. I think that'll come with fitness as well, as he has more endurance at the end of games and doesn't get fatigued as quickly. But yeah, Luka is phenomenal. I had to have him at number 2. At number 1, you may have guessed it. Yes, I do have Pride Wanamaker. No, it is Steph Curry. of the Golden State Warriors. Wardell, Stephen Curry, possibly the best player in the game. I'll maybe do a best 10 players overall ranking at some point, see where he lands next to Giannis. But what can I say about Steph? What argument against Steph being the best point guard in the league wasn't answered in that playoff run? Oh, he can't be the number one option on a good team anymore. Well, he just was, and they won the title convincingly. Oh, he's aging. He can't rely on the three. Well, the three was falling. Playoffs, what do you shoot? Let's have a look. 39%, 10.4 attempts per night. And no stat will ever do Steph Curry justice because he is so much more than the stat sheet. Because when you see him go, wherever he goes on the court, the gravity that Steph Curry has is so powerful that alone, he can go through the biggest shooting slump in the league. He did almost last year. He had a terrible 10-game streak. And what happened? Teams still could not afford to leave him alone because he is so good. His gravity off ball is unlike any other point guard on this list. Everyone else on this league list, well, had slight variations. They all have very similar pick and roll heavy play styles. Steph Curry is just so different to everyone else on this list. And that's what makes him so valuable is teams just still don't know how to defend him. Even though the fact that he's been dominating the league for 7-8 years now, you still don't know how to defend him off ball. They still can't come up with a way that stops what Golden State have going on. How much does he affect his teams winning? He got them a title last year. How much does he affect, in terms of his individual team? The way he works with Draymond Green and the way he works with smart guys like Klay Thompson and Andrew Wiggins and Kevon Looney and all those other guys they have over in Golden State. I don't know what more I can say about Steph Curry other than he is, without a doubt, the best point guard in the NBA. He is the most value to his team. He is impacts winning more than any other point guard in the NBA by a country mile, in my opinion. It wasn't even close for me between him and Luka. It was a pretty clear-cut Steph is number one. If you did have Luka number one, I would be interested to hear why you had him over Steph. But yeah, for me, I don't know what more to say, but just go and watch tape from last year's final series because Steph is the best point guard in the NBA. Alright, that's going to do it for today's video. Thank you so much for watching. Comment below your thoughts. What was your ranking? What you agreed with? What you disagreed with? I'd love to hear your thoughts. It was such a tough exercise doing this, and I had no idea how hard it was going to be ranking the top 10 point guards. I'd love to hear your thoughts on all this. Hit me up on social media, Twitter, Instagram. Subscribe to the channel so you can stay up to date as I do more of these videos, and I'll see you in the next one. Adios.